Hi everyone, Stepan here. It's Thursday, so welcome to another Thursday Endgame video. Today I would like to talk about a very important topic, and that's planning in the endgame. I made a video about planning in the middle game, and most people either plan less or stop planning in the endgame, or they definitely don't devote as much attention to it as they should. And I had a discussion with my coach the other day about planning in tactical positions. We were going over one of my games, and we both concluded that usually when the position gets sharp, I stop planning and I start playing moves instead of playing small incremental plans which improve my position. And the same often goes for the endgame. Sometimes people play planless in the endgame, not because they don't know how to plan, but because they are not used to planning in the endgame as much as they are in the middle game. So endgames are usually won by planning, and the good thing about the endgame is that it gives you a lot more freedom, and it's not as punishing as the middle game. Sometimes, or often, definitely much more often than in the middle game, you are able to repeat what you wanted to do, you are able to retry, you get a second chance, because in the middle game you make one mistake, you lose either tactically or somehow, and the position is unlikely to get repeated, or you are unlikely to get a second chance. In the end game you get to do that much more often. So planning pays off much more often. Okay, I'm going to show you 3 games to explain what I want to say. Before we start, I would just like to say one thing, and maybe you should consider that for a while. Endgames are won in 2 ways. Way 1, or the first way, you win by promoting a pawn and you queen and you win. The second way is you attack something in your opponent's position, you win it, you win material, and he resigns. Ultimately, again, you win by promoting to a queen, but the winning strategy was either promotion or attacking something. So bear that in mind. Okay, the first position we are going to look at is Mark Taimanov versus Hans Reh, played in 1981 in Hugovens, if I can say. So this position is fairly simple. White has a more active rook. Why? Because the rook is attacking the c-pawn and black's rook is defending the c-pawn. The second reason why white is better is because he has an extra pawn. Okay, so playing this position mindlessly, for example, playing rook a4 to attack the a5 pawn, or playing king d3, or playing f3, or playing e5, wouldn't lead to a good position. If you play e5, you may win if your opponent makes a mistake, but it's going to be much harder. Coming up with the correct plan in this exact position would win you the game, and that's exactly what Mark Taimanov did. So now let's try to assess the position and try to come up with a plan. So option A, we can win by queening one of our pawns. That doesn't seem likely. If we play e5 and we play for the extra pawn, on the e file it's currently blockaded by the king, it can be defended, the e8 square is defended by the rook, so that doesn't seem too likely. Option B, attacking a target in black's position, seems much more likely. So which targets do we have? We have a target on a5, but it's very hard to attack because then we stop attacking the c5 pawn, which means that the rook is able to move, which means that it defends the a5 pawn. c5 is attacked already, but it's very hard to attack it again. So we need some more targets. Okay, so the correct plan here is to create another weakness in black's position. How can we do that? And that's the first part of the plan. We are talking about small incremental plans in the endgame. You don't plan until you queen. Nobody does that. And if you read books written by strong grandmasters, they all say that grandmasters don't calculate 20 moves deep. They don't find plans which are 10 moves long. They find small incremental plans because they are much easier to execute, and it's much more likely that your opponent is not going to stop a small incremental move. So first plan, create another weakness. How can we do that? We can take on f5. We check, and after e takes f5, king takes f5, we have another weakness. Now we have 3 weaknesses. Okay, now let's come up with the second plan. We know that we don't win by promoting our pawn. The f4 pawn is blockaded, doesn't really seem likely. So we have to win by winning one of the weaknesses. There are 2 ways to play this position. One way seems much more intuitive, and it seems like a plan that many weaker players like myself would try to employ, and that's playing the move rook e4, rook e5. You attack the c5 pawn, you chase the king away, you get your king to e4, you play f5, f6, f7, f8 queen, and then you win. But black can move in anticipation of rook e5. So, for example, king f6, king g6 as well, but king f6 is more precise because there is no check. And now if you play rook e5, then black could continue with either c4 or a4. And these two moves are very hard to see for weaker players. It turns out that a4 is much stronger. If you play c4, then the position gets complicated. You don't take on a5 because that would allow counterplay or counterplay with c3. You take on c4 first, and after rook c4 you take on a5, and now the black king is cut off, the position is winning for white. However, after rook e5, if black plays a4, of course, if you don't take, he is going to take, so the pawns get dissolved and the c5 pawn is defended. So ba4 seems very likely, but now c4, king d2, c3, king c2, rook c4, and now black is getting away with it. So this doesn't work. So let's come back to the original position. So we know that our plan has to include winning one of the weaknesses. The problem is, if we try to round up the c5 pawn, get the rook to e5, get the king to c4, then black gets a ton of counterplay with the move a4, and also we may lose the f4 pawn if we're not careful. We said that we couldn't attack the a5 pawn because then c5 is no longer attacked, so let's try to attack g4. And this plan I absolutely love. I remember seeing this game for the first time. I actually have it written in my notebook under finding plans, and this is a great plan. So the plan is, let's do this and let's win the g4 pawn. And the beautiful thing about that plan is that black cannot do anything about it. The king is in Zugzwang, cannot get to g5. The rook is stuck defending the c5 pawn. If it moves, c5 drops with check. And against that plan, black is completely hopeless. So in this position, Mark Taimanov continued with king e2. And black may as well have resigned here. He tried rook c7, but now king f1. And in this position, if black just waits, plays, I don't know, king f6 or rook c8, let's say king f6, then after king g2 and king f5 and king g3, well, then you're stuck for a move. Now, if you don't do anything, I will play rook e4 and rook e5 and then win your g4 pawn, and then that's it. Now, you cannot move anything. I could also probably just continue with f3 after I win your pawn. Okay, so in this position, after king f1, to prevent king g2 and king g3, black played rook to d7. In this position, if you play king to g2, that doesn't work as well. If king to g2, then rook to d5 defending c5, and after king to g3, rook to d3 check. And in this position, your king has to go back, and it's basically a repetition of the position. If you play f3, then black wins. Okay, so you have to be slightly more precise. After rook to d7, simply takes on c5, king takes on f4, but now king to g2, and black is completely busted. Rook d2 played, but rook takes a5, and we don't have to go any further. This position is just over. So, coming back to the original position, we had to understand two things. The first thing is, we cannot win by pushing our passed pawn on f4. That's never going to happen. Second thing, we have to win by attacking one of the weaknesses, and we had to understand what's the correct weakness. c5 is restraining the black rook, so it's already attacked. We cannot put extra pressure on it, so the correct plan was to attack g4. And try to remember this position when you're playing a rook endgame. It's very important to know how you're going to win. In rook endgames, it's usually putting pressure on something, and it's also very important to know where to put pressure, which point in your opponent's position is weakest. Now let's look at a completely different type of position. This is Aronian Bakro. Again, white is better. Again, white is a pawn up. What can we do? Okay, the first question, can we win by promoting one of our pawns? Well, okay. Doesn't seem likely at the moment, but we can try to get to that. Let's try to answer the second question first. Is there a target in the black position which we can put pressure on? Well, not really. This exchange happened, and I'm going to show you what I mean after this trade of pawns. After gf5, ef5, putting pressure on h6 is very hard. You have a light squared bishop, your king is never getting to h5. Putting pressure on f5 doesn't seem likely either. We can get our bishop to d3, or to h3, or to d7. But then to put extra pressure on the pawn, we would have to get our king to e6 or e5. If we get the king to e5, then bishop b8. If we get the king to e6, and let's say our bishop is on d3, so let's say the bishop is here, let's say the king is here, even in that case, black would simply play f4 and get rid of the pawn, so that doesn't work. Okay, now, we cannot win but by winning material, we cannot win but by putting pressure on the black position. So we have to win by promoting our pawns. Now again, weaker players like myself will look at the a6 pawn and then say, oh, I get my king to b7, I promote. Well, that doesn't work. If you try to get your king to b7 somehow, then black could try to dissolve one of the pawns and win the other. So these two pawns would drop, and that wouldn't work. Getting your king too far away from the position would firstly make your pawns very vulnerable. Secondly, this pawn would be very strong and your bishop would have to start defending. So how do we win? Okay, the correct plan and the only winning chance for white is to use his pawn majority to promote his e-pawn or his f-pawn, depending on what happens. And this plan is remarkably strong. And Levon Aronian, being a very strong player, this was played in 2005 in the World Cup. He found the plan and he just played great. So okay, bishop f1 played, getting the bishop to the other diagonal, to g2, simply to be able to defend the a6 pawn if the king approaches, and also to support his pawns going forward, to support e4 and f3. Okay, king g5, the king approaches, king to g3, getting away from the pawns so that the pawns could move, king f6, and we're not going to discuss every move. We know the plan. In the endgame, if you know the plan and if you know it's winning, then you don't really have to think about anything. Okay, king h4, getting the king as close as possible, bishop c6, now finally preparing the e4 push, bishop b6, and now e4. The f2 pawn is defended, black doesn't have to take, the pawns are getting traded anyway, you don't have f4, so king f6, f4 played, you can take, now as black, if you don't take then e5, so fe4, bishop e4, and now we win. And that's it, it's as simple as this. Why do we win? Because the f4 pawn cannot be stopped. It's opposite colored bishops, but the black bishop on b6 is overworked, and one very, very key idea here is that in this position, if we look at the starting position, okay, let's say after king to g5, in this position, it wasn't possible to get our king to b7 to push the a6 pawn to promotion. But look at this position. After fe4, bishop e4, we can now do this. We can now do that. We can now get our king to b7 to push a7, a8 equals queen. Why? Because our bishop is going to be defending the f5 pawn. So look at what happened. King e6, king g4, king f6, bishop g2, bishop a7, bishop h3, bishop c5, f5, and now, and I mean this is a beautiful position, Levon created the perfect setup. His h3 bishop is stopping the h-pawn from queening for black, it's also defending f5, and now the king is just going to get to a7 and the pawn is going to queen. After bishop a7, black actually resigned. Let me just show you what could have happened. Let's say king f4, let's say bishop e6, king e4, bishop a7, king d5, bishop e6, king d6, and you can see where this is going. If the king tries to attack the bishop, then the f-pawn promotes. If the bishop moves away, then this pawn promotes. So let's say the bishop tries to prevent our f-pawn from moving and the king goes here, well then I have two pawns, one of them is going to queen. So this plan, I mean, knowing what you have to do is extremely powerful. In this position, Levon knew that he couldn't queen his a-pawn, he knew that he had no targets to attack, he knew that he had to win with the pawn on the f-file or on the e-file. Okay, final position, Eric Kohn versus Akiba Rubinstein. Now this rook takes c1, king c1 just happened. Okay, so equal material, we have targets to attack, fine. Are we going to win by promoting one of our pawns or by putting pressure on our opponent's position? Well, in this case, we are going to win by putting pressure on our opponent's position. Why? Because white has weaknesses, black doesn't have weaknesses. If you had to assess this position and find the two biggest weaknesses in white's position, what would you say? Well, in my opinion, h2 is the biggest weakness, a3 is a weakness, but white could stop me from attacking that by playing a4, so that doesn't really work. So h2. And how do we get to h2? Well, we play king f6, king g5, king h4, king h3, and okay, that's the first part of the plan. We want to attack the h2 pawn. Okay, what is white going to do in the meantime? He's going to get his king to g1 or to h1. Now, what we know is that once white's king gets to h1 or g1, it's going to be limited to these two squares, otherwise he loses the h2 pawn and he loses the game because our h7 pawn simply queens. So we need the second part of the plan. Now this is very hard, but the good thing in the endgame is that you can reset, you can retry, you can basically, if you made a mistake in formulating your plan, very often you can get away with it and try again. So what I would advise you to do, because it's very hard to visualize this position until the end, is to just play small incremental plans, finish the one plan and then start with the other. So we're not even going to discuss what black wants to do once his king does get to h3. We will get to that. So let's just get to h3. Okay, king h3. And now we need to do something. Okay, he is defending. Now, what we have to do is we have to leave white with a new weakness. Okay, he has a weakness on h2 that he is limited to defending at the moment, but he also has doubled f pawns, and if we manage to fix them, and if we manage to force white to trade off all the pawns except for the weakness on the f file, then we are going to be able to get to the pawn quicker, we are going to be able to win the pawn. Why? Because the white king has been forced to the back rank. So for the moment the white king is forced to defend h2, which gives us infinite time to do whatever we want. What we want to do is we want to make sure that these two pawns get traded off. White remains with this pawn, okay, one pawn on the f file. And then what we do is we just play king to g3 and we win the pawn because white isn't going to be able to play king to f2. And this may seem hard, but because white is so limited in his options, it's more than doable. There's nothing white can do about it. And if you notice, all three games we looked at, there was nothing the defender could do about it. Okay, so let's see what Rubinstein did. By the way, I fell in love with Akiba Rubinstein lately. He was just a genius. Okay, e5, h1, b5, fixing the queenside pawns, f5, g5, h5, g4. Okay, now white has several options. Of course, if he allows g takes f3, then the king is stuck for the rest of the game on the two squares, and the white king is just going to get around and win. So e4 is played, trying to trick black. So if g f3, then of course e takes f4 and white wins. So f takes e4 first, f takes e4, h4, and now, okay, it's not quite what black had planned. Black had planned to create a weakness on the f file. In this case, he has a weakness on the e file, on the e4 square, and it's just the same thing. So what we want to do is we want to force white to trade off these two pawns for these two pawns, and then we just win the pawn. Okay, so king g1 played, white had nothing else to do, g3, h takes g3, h takes g3, and that's it. That's just game over. I mean, I was fascinated with this game because from the starting position, it seems like Rubinstein knew exactly what he had to do. Even if he didn't, he could have stopped and thought during the game. That's a good thing. In the end game, you have time to create small incremental plans. And his winning technique was perfect. No, I actually checked the game with an engine. There were some improvements, but they were completely meaningless. Everything he did was part of a plan, and everything worked. Eventually, the engine changes its mind and says, oh, what Rubinstein did was just perfect. That's just winning. Okay, so to conclude, think about plans in the end game. Don't think about moves. Don't think about single move threats. Oh, I want to attack this. Have a plan in mind. Know why I want to do that. Most importantly, know how you're going to win or how you have to defend. Does your opponent win by promoting a pawn? Does your opponent win by attacking one of your targets? Same goes for when you are attacking. Know what you have to do, and it will be much easier to create a plan. Create a plan, it will be much easier to play. Okay, thank you very much for watching. See you tomorrow. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.